Good afternoon. It's time for another report on the Viper build, and today we are going to make templates for this, for the cockpit canopy. Had a mention of how active my last video was, so this time I'm going to try to lock it down on the tripod for most of the shoot and try for something a little bit more sedate this time. So here we go. The first thing that you want to notice about this cockpit is they've done a really nice job of duplicating the rivets. It's a step up from the last version. The plastic is exceptionally clear in the places that it needs to be. They did not go the extra step to make it actually pivot up like it should. I mean, this base here should be stationary and this should pivot up from it, but I still give it a 9 out of 10. It's leaps and bounds better than the original one, but it has that same pesky problem, is that it needs to be painted, and painted with thin lines that are kept clean of the windows. So what I'm going to do is make some painting templates that will cover the windows so that you can spray your primer and your paint color on top of that and then peel the window masks back off. But the first step to doing anything is to mask this off. What I use is what's known in the sign making trade as transfer tape. I use this for all of my pattern making. It's a lower tack paper-like tape, like a masking tape. Sometimes they use this in the automotive painting industries as well. But it's a lower tack tape that has a very clean edge to it, and I'm going to apply that to the various areas. So let me turn the whole camera around and try to focus it on the work that needs to be done. Okay, first step is to tear off a piece of this tape and pick a surface and simply push it down into it. Now I'm going to use my friend Mr. Toothpick here to ride this down into the corners. Now to do this, I just need a sharp toothpick, a goodly amount of this tape, and then the shapes for this cockpit are very simple, all things considered. They're not the contour-y shapes like I sometimes get with other parts of other starships, so hopefully this should go pretty quickly. And I'm going to do a couple of these and then stop tape and finish the rest of that step and then pick it up on the next step. But basically it's as simple as this. Take a real sharp pencil, ride it down into the contours where we've pushed that tape and lift it off. Now all I'm going to do is stick it down to a piece of white sheet styrene. There's one of the shapes, and we'll repeat this again for all the shapes that we want to make templates for. And here you can see, here are all the pieces that were traced off to make up the cockpit. So now what I'm going to do is pop this in the scanner and scan these shapes. What I'm doing here is I'm putting the bringing the scan into my software, which is Corel Draw version 6 at this point. And you can see here that, bring it in, there are all the shapes. Let me do a little rotate on that. Get that just right. There you go. And now comes the tedious part. I trace by hand around all these shapes, and then I send that to plots. Okay, what you can see here is my first stab. You have to start somewhere, and I just make a first run. The ones on the left here are my best guess. The ones on the right here are slightly different. than the ones on the left, and they're alternate versions. I wanted to try a couple different shapes. They look very much similar, but I've tweaked them a little bit. On the ones on the left are a little bit more tweaked than the ones on the right. And since I want to plot them all at once and remember the good ones from the bad ones, I will keep this file up. This is the first step, and I'll just simply select these, and up pops my plotting software. There you go. And this gives me the shapes that, okay, and put a weeding box around it. And I'm sending it to the plotter. And I'm using black material for my tests. That's it. And I'm using the black material for my testing, since it's a cheaper material, and there's no paint issues with this. This is simply paint mask on plastic. So let me cut these off and I'll show you what I got. I've removed the excess vinyl from the sheet, and this is what I was left with. So now I will simply try to pop these on the side of the canopy and judge if they were successful. So again, not going to bore you with that. I will be back in a second with the results. Okay, I recognize this is going to be difficult to explain, and it may not show up on the video at all, but here are the pieces in place on the canopy. Now I've eliminated some of these shapes already automatically as being the other, one or the other set was closer to what I needed and would take less adapting, but now I'm down to the final pieces, but they do need some tweaking, and I want to show you what I mean by that. See, I will use this piece as an example. This piece right here, depending on how it catches the light, you may not be able to see, but the vinyl actually starts to go up the wall of the canopy on this back corner, and you can see where that needs to be trimmed out. Well, rather than asking the modeler to trim that out, I'm just going to tweak the shape a little bit and then replot them and refine and continue to refine the shapes and get it down to what it needs to be. I very rarely ever hit the exact shape on the first go round. I don't have access. You saw how primitive my methods were. It's not like I have access to any CAD files on these things. It's strictly trace it, scan it, draw it, refine it. That's the process. But you can see I'm pretty darn close on a lot of these shapes. The big triangles I thought were going to be the least amount of problems, and they are. They need a little bit of tweaking. Again, up in this corner here, it's starting to run over top of the side of the canopy, and I can just adjust that a little bit in my software before I send the shapes to be recut. That's mostly in there. That's mostly filling the area that it wants to, with the exception of a little bit of length there needs to be trimmed off. So it's little things like this. This gives me good intel to go on, and then I can cut another set, and hopefully have this thing knocked out in one or two sets, or one or two iterations of it before I've got the final shapes. And I'm back. Seems like it's been a year since I've last made a video, and it in fact has. It's now into the new year, and I'm sorry to have taken such a long break between the first half and the second half of this video, but some life type of stuff happened. I got a gracious and huge order from John over at Starship Modeler, so I had to drop what I was doing and get that plotted and back in the mail, and that took a few days. And the New Year's and all that kind of stuff happened. So we're back to part 2 on the canopy. Now this is all going to be compressed into one video, so I don't know why I'm saying part 2, except the fact you might notice I'm dressed somewhat differently. I didn't just run out and change and come back. It's been a few days. I have made the first revision of the patterns, and I've switched over to the orange material because I'm pretty confident, A, that this is the final product, and B, I want you to see the difference between it and the black so that you can know which step I'm on actually. And what I'm going to do is the same thing I did before. I'm going to peel these off and stick them down to the plastic canopy so you can see the difference in them, and I'll be back in a second after doing that. Here are the results from the the second version, the first orange version, and you can see I'm really getting down to details. It is very, very close, but still not good enough. This shape up here continues to vex me, and I need to give it another pass. The sides are a lot better than they were on the first go round. This curve is right, but you can see where the back there overlaps or starts to come up the side. So a little bit of trimming on that is called for, and the top point of this triangle needs to come down a hair, which will thicken up the look of this front beam. But and the most notable thing about the center piece is that it needs to come up just a hair more. It stops there. It needs to come up just a little bit more. So I think it's going to take one more pass, one more iteration before I get these things zeroed in, and that's what I'll show you next. Speaking of showing you things, I wanted you to see how the etch. Remember what I told you about the primer coat bringing all the details and surfaces together? Well, this is the etch. Let me put it on a white background here. Put the etch on, and then a coat of primer. And you can see how that really blends it all together very nicely. Let me bring it up closer so you can see all the detail. It just makes all that detail pop. Very nice. Okay, here are the results of the second black version, the third overall if you're counting. I am very happy with this. I am going to say it's 97% done. I overcompensated a little bit and made this front panel a little too long now, so I'll go in and just fractionally reduce that, and I think we'll have a final set. Here's the final orange masking in place. Every nook and cranny has been covered. Got it as close to the corners as I think I can get it. And now the next step will be to carefully cover or tape off or close off the bottom of this so that I don't even accidentally get any paint up inside there. But the next step is to cover it with a primer coat, and then after that a finish coat, and do whatever weathering I want to do to the canopy, and then peel off the vinyl. But that is the next step. Is the fun part. It's the putting the paint down. Here's an unglamorous shot of it covered in primer. Now it's got a coat of primer on it. I'll put another light coat of primer on it tomorrow. It's getting kind of late in the day today, and think about what color the final canopy is going to be. The framework is actually not all that different from the color of the gray primer, so I might just put a clear finish over the gray primer and then weather it from there. I think I probably still want to go with like a medium gray enamel. I'll have to see what I've got available. And here is the cockpit canopy ready for vinyl removal. I have taken off the tape that I had inside to keep the inside clean. You can see the back of the vinyl in there. On the outside I've got, you see, 2 coats of primer, and let that sit up overnight. And then I put on a light coat of a metallizer, I think it was burnt metal, and that gave it an extra bit of light blocking. Plus, hopefully what's going to happen, oh, and on top of that, I'm sorry, I put a coat of medium ghost gray, which is a cooler gray color. What I'm hoping is if I rub some of that ghost gray off the high spots, that the metallic paint underneath will show up a little bit better, giving you a nice weathered look. But I need to put the camera down so that I can peel up the vinyl and show you what the final thing looked like. And ta-da! The masks are removed. And we have nice crisp lines, nice clean straight edges where the vinyl has kept the paint off of it. You don't get the paint creeping up underneath like sometimes happens with tape, paper tapes in particular. I need to do a tiny bit of buffing with a little bit of a tack cloth. I've got some, looks like a little bit of a smudge there, and I think that came from the, oops, where'd you go? You can see it's very clean, but a little bit of a smudge came from slightly greasy finger as I was removing it. So I will let this sit now. That I wanted to get the vinyl off as soon as the paint was dry enough to let me do this. I had all of those coats except for the primer coat was all done today. So in the span of a few hours, I put 2 coats of, or a coat of the metallizer, and then a couple coats of the ghost gray, and then I even hit it with a satin finish, all on top of, you know, in basically the span of an afternoon. But now I want to get the vinyl off as soon as possible, but now I want to let this dry overnight, so I'm not going to touch it again to do any little cleanup on it until it's had a good chance to cure. And this is what it looks like when you sit it inside. Now I've not done anything to this body yet as far as making it the camouflage gray. When it's done, it'll be the same color as these wings, obviously. But I think it turned out just swell. Nice clean lines. So and that would be your pilot inside of that, and the windows are still mighty clean. Again, I say there's a little bit of fingerprinty smooch that I can clean off of that once the paint has had a chance to harden and toughen up. And making templates is as easy as that.